Welcome to Live Life with Sean. I'm your host, Sean Higgins. I'm a lifelong information security technology expert with a passion for speaking, coaching, and writing. In this podcast, I'm going to introduce a thought and give you my question and give you my thoughts around the topic for tonight. I hope that this topic will get you thinking and that my thoughts around this topic will help you find your answers. At the end of every episode, I will offer you a tool to help you work through what is coming up for you. This show is recorded live, and you are invited to add your questions to the discussion. If I do not get to your questions during the show, I will do my best to answer them on my blog or on a future show. If you enjoy this content, please share it, subscribe it, like it, and or leave a comment or question, as this will help others find this podcast. Now, I know normally when I do this podcast, I'm reflecting on a question. But this week, what I want to do is just reflect on grief. And it's very appropriate for me tonight, because tonight is the 10th anniversary of when my mother passed away. And, I'd like to say that I planned this all out perfectly so this would happen, but it wasn't. I mean, it really started last week. Last Thursday, it was Thanksgiving in the US. I talked about being thankful. And on Friday morning, I'm taking my walk, walking the dogs, and I'm just kind of thinking through the podcast from last week. What did I do well? What did I not do well? What would I have liked to have changed? You're always very critical of yourself, and I know that I was doing that. But I started thinking about, some memories of my Thanksgivings with my family, being my parents and my brothers and sisters. And, I just started thinking about us around the table, and the image that came to me was my mother walking out of the kitchen with the turkey. And for some reason, I just started crying. I just cried. I just didn't understand it. All I can say is grief is a funny thing. You never know when it's going to come up and, tap you on the shoulder and tell you got something you have to deal with. And as I was continuing on my walk, I was thinking, man, I haven't felt this sad about my mother in a while. And as I'm walking, I'm sitting there going, while walking, I'm thinking that, 10-year anniversary is coming up. It's on December 3rd. Oh, crap. That's next Thursday. And I knew that I had to talk about grief. And, I've learned a lot of things about grief, mainly because I've lost both my mother and my father. I remember at one time I was talking to somebody about grief and said, yeah, I've lost some people in my life. And, they said to me, until you lose somebody really close to you, like your parents, you really don't know what grief is. And I said, okay, I just kind of tuck that away and, see what happens. And then 10 years ago, it was probably about 7 p.m. Surprisingly, we lost my mother. And let me set the stage for you on that day 10 years ago. My mother had just gone through some cancer treatments, bunch of tests, and on December 3rd, she found out she was cancer-free. And she was calling all of us in the family, and we were each having our own little talk with her, and it felt like Christmas had arrived. Didn't care about anything else except my mother's cancer-free. We've turned the corner from the health struggles that she had. And just like, it feels good. Not more than 2 or 3 hours later, I get another call that she passed away. I happened to be at the 50th birthday of one of my coworkers. And I hadn't been there that long, maybe about 40 minutes when I got the call. And I just remember at that point just being in shock, just not knowing what to feel, not knowing what to do. And I just remember telling people I had to leave, sorry, I just lost my mother. My wife and I, we drove home. I remember telling my daughter, I don't think she understood, and I don't think I knew what the heck was going on. Basically went on autopilot because I had to figure out how to get from Canada down to Myrtle Beach, how soon I can get there, what's the easiest way for me to get there. And what I was able to find was easiest and cheapest for me to fly through Buffalo, New York. It's only about an hour and a half drive from my house. So it's not far. And it was substantially cheaper than flying out of Toronto. So made those arrangements, packed up, tried to get some sleep, didn't really sleep. And I remember getting up, it was somewhere between 2 and 3 in the morning. Again, just kind of being focused on getting to where I needed to be. I needed to get down there to be with my father. I knew my sister and brothers were going to be joining us. And just wanted to get down there. And, just interesting things that I remember from that journey. First off, I went to the Starbucks near my house, which happened to be open 24/7. And I just went through the drive-through because, I need a little caffeine so I can make the drive down to Buffalo at, I think it was like 2 in the morning. Wanted to be there bright and early. Wanted to be there a couple hours because sometimes the border can be a nightmare. Didn't expect it to be, but was just being extra cautious. Got up to the front, ready to pay. Oh, it's free. Like, okay, thanks. Made the drive down to Buffalo as I'm crossing the border into the U.S. The border customs agent, asked me business or pleasure, and I said neither. Again, just I don't know where my head was, just trying to get to the airport. Okay, that was job number one: get to the airport, get on the flights, and make it there. And he just says, "Okay, go." No other questions. And I'm like, whew, thankfully, he didn't ask me any more questions. I don't know if I could have handled it. Remember getting to the airport, and I must have had over an hour, maybe 2 hours there at the airport, before my flight. And I remember going to one end of the airport, as far away from people as I could be. And that was the first time I cried for my mother. I just let it all out. It was just hit me like a wave of emotions. Just let it out. And I don't know how long I was there. Felt so much better after that. It was just like the first release, the first time I could just say, okay, and let it go. Wouldn't be the last time, but just the first time. I remember getting down to Myrtle Beach. I don't really remember the flights. I remember meeting my father at the airport. I was the first sibling to arrive, and my sister and one of my brothers was probably about 30 minutes behind me. They were coming from different areas, so they were about 30 minutes behind me. So I'm there, got my luggage, I got with my father, just kind of hanging out, seeing how he's doing, just chatting away. And siblings arrive, and we head back to my parents' place. And I don't remember a lot of what was on. There was a lot of busyness going around. Okay, what do we got to do? My other brother didn't arrive for a few more hours. I remember going to the funeral parlor and, just not really it was just kind of like, okay, these things we got to do. Let's get them done. We did a whole bunch of stuff, gave them some information, and I remember they wrote the obituary for my mother for Myrtle Beach. And, I don't think we thought as a family, okay, they'll just do it. We don't have to worry about it. They wrote it in Southern fashion, which meant talk about my father, talk about myself, my brothers, and then my sister. My sister's second in line. She comes right after me, and she probably rule the whole family. She was not happy at all. Oh, that was not good. I remember we got to see my mother for the final time because she's going to be cremated, and we all got to say our goodbyes. Again, more crying, just which was interesting because there aren't a lot of times in my life where I cried. Because, as a man, men are not supposed to cry, but I just remember just being overcome and just letting it go. I remember several times going for walks, especially in the morning, because I like to walk in the morning, and just me and my music and just crying about my mother. It was kind of a blur being down there in Myrtle Beach, just a lot of things that we need to get done. A lot of jumping through hoops. It was a Friday night when she passed away, so Saturday and Sunday was just to keep ourselves busy, keep ourselves moving. We set up a memorial for my mother that following week down at Myrtle Beach. It was at the community center. Everybody come by and pay their respects, and the place was packed. And I don't remember how many people were there that said they were my mother's best friend. It was great to hear, very uplifting. It was more of a celebration, which was good. I remember the next day, I was to fly back to Canada to get my family, and my siblings were going to drive my father back up to Connecticut. And I remember getting home, just relaxing with my family for a bit, and then the next day getting in the car and going down to Connecticut so that we could have a funeral for my mother with the people who were there in Connecticut. One of the things that we did when we were in Connecticut and we learned this lesson was we wrote the obituary for my mother for the Connecticut area. I think I started it. I gave it a general framework, but then each of the siblings went in and really added their color to it. So it became much more colorful, more of a story about her life, which was good. It was much better than the one in Myrtle Beach. I remember being in Connecticut. Remember having an afternoon where the boys got together at my brother's house, and we were just doing odds and ends around the house, fixing this, fixing that. I think it was just keep my father occupied day. It was. I think my brother was running out of things for us to do, or just making up stuff like, "Oh, paint the railing. Go ahead." I remember the funeral, and I remember the last song that we were singing as part of the service was Amazing Grace. And just not being able to sing the song and just crying. And my daughter's right next to me and just holding her tight as I try my damnedest to sing. And because I wanted to sing for my mother. She loved music. I love to sing. Okay, I may not be good at it, but I just wanted to sing just for her and could not. And there's been many times since my mother passed that, it's just hit me out of nowhere that, I just gotta just sit and be with the loss of my mother. One of the things that I remember was when I was driving back from Buffalo back to my house, and I got home, nobody was home. My wife was working, my daughter was at school, which I was glad for because I just remember that day that I just could not be happy. I couldn't be happy about anything. And I just didn't understand it. And thankfully, I was able to get a hold of my minister, and I went over to her house and had a cup of tea. And I just telling her, what's happened with my mother and, how I just could not be happy. And I'm glad that I had somebody to talk to because she said, you know what? That's just grief. And I said, okay, I can live with not being happy, knowing that it's just a phase that I'll get through. And I just have to be with it and just lived with it for a bit and it passed. And there have been other times where, grief just kind of grabs a hold of me. And, with the grief with my mother, it usually is time for me to sit down and really, really reflect. Think about her life, think about what she brought to us, or what she brought to me, what she meant to me. And as I was preparing for tonight, there were several blogs that I've written about that, about the whole process. And, it's not going to be complete, until when my father passed away, just a little bit over 5 years after my mother passed. I really believe that he never really, really got over my mother. And, I think that weighed heavily on him. I remember the first time that I visited my father after my mother passed and him still struggling with it. And that was several months later. And, the grief that I had for my mother passing, I can only imagine what it was like for my father, who was married to her for 48 years. Sorry. But I really want to just add some color to this, because it was a little bit different when my father passed away. His health was failing, so you kind of knew it was coming, but, you never really know. And I remember being out in San Francisco. I was at a conference, and I was going out to dinner with a friend of mine who I hadn't seen in probably 5 or 6 years anyway. We were going to have dinner, and as I'm walking down the street to find the restaurant that she suggested, I got the call. Got the call from my brother telling me my father had passed away. And I was just didn't know what to do. I guess it was the same type of shock that I felt. It was similar to the shock I felt when my mother passed away. I think I walked around a block 2 or 3 times because I just didn't know what to do. I eventually tried to get a hold of my friend. I couldn't get a hold of her. And I headed back to my hotel room to try and figure out, okay, how do I get from San Francisco to Myrtle Beach? Which was an adventure, which I really talk about here, but it was just, had some technical challenges. Finally booked a red-eye ticket that would get me out. I think it was like 10:30, 11 o'clock. And it was, this was 5, 6 o'clock in the evening. And my friend had called me and said she's going to go to the same restaurant. She's going to go and have some food. And, if I want to join her, let her know. And if I don't, that's fine. She's okay. She understood. And after I finished making the arrangements, kind of got my things a little organized. And I said, you know what, I got 3 hours before I have to even think about heading to the airport. So I decided anyway, I'd go and meet with her, which was good. It allowed me to sit and talk with somebody about my father, and, the other thing is that she offered to get me to the airport, which was good because that way I didn't have to figure it out. One less thing I had to figure out, sometimes when you just need to get something done, especially at the last minute, you're in a city trying to get somewhere, it's better if somebody else took care of that. And I was grateful for her for that. Did get something to eat. We talked about my father for a bit. She got me to the airport and got to the airport, and I'm waiting around, and I'm like, okay, let me wander around this airport because, the last time I went through this, I bawled my eyes out and it just didn't happen, and it's really surprised me that I haven't had the same cry that I had for my mother. I had several cries for my mother. I've had very few for my father. And I guess, what I've thought about is that I think part of it is, what's my level of maturity with grief? Where am I on that road for grief? And the other thing I think that it is partially what is my relationship with loss with that person? I haven't cried about my father, but, I've had days where, I remember a couple months after my father passed, and I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, you know what? I am just mad. I don't know what it is, but there's just this anger just hanging over me like a dark cloud, and it just won't go away. And, she looked at me, she thought for a moment, and she goes, who is this anger from? And I took a breath, and the first person that came to me was my father. And she goes, okay, why are you mad at your father? And the first word that came to me was proud. And I just had to sit with that word for a moment. And then what came to me was, because my father had passed away, I was mad at him because I no longer had somebody to make proud. And it really just hit me funny that, I had spent my whole life doing things to make him proud. It's probably not totally true, but that was the realization that I came to in that moment. And speaking that and just sitting with that, and my friend asked me to, you know, sit with that for a while and reflect on it. And she knows I like to write. She goes, okay, go sit and write about it. Go sit and see if there's a message in this for you, which I did, and which was very helpful for me. It helped me connect with my father in a way that I hadn't connected when he was living. And I've had a couple other episodes like that about my father, which just really floors me and is different about him, different about the grief that I go through with my father versus the grief that I go through with my mother. And I guess the only thing I can say to you is that grief is different for everyone. I'll be sitting there and some thought will come by and I'll think about my mother. It doesn't always have to be that I'll be sad that she's not here. It'll be, oh yeah, she used to do that. Oh, I get a big smile on my face. Sometimes I'll be working and I'll just stop and look at the back of my hands. I don't know what it is about the back of my hands. It's not all the time, not tonight, but sometimes I'll just look at the back of my hands and see my father. And again, grief is not always about sadness that they're not here. Yeah, I've been sad a fair bit this past week, just trying to figure out what the message is around grief that I am hopefully sharing with you that will help you with grief, knowing that it's okay. What you're going through, it's just grief. It'll pass. It's okay. And if you're a guy out there, it's okay to cry. I sometimes sit there and wonder why I haven't cried about my father's loss. And I don't know why. I've tried to be open to it. You can't just do it, it just has to flow. Just like last Friday when I was walking the dogs, thought of my mother, and the tears just started rolling. They just did. And I guess what I want to tell you is when those feelings come, be with them. Just let them be with you. I think that the grief that came through me last Friday prompted me to talk here, to talk to you about grief. If I had, as I look at what I might have talked about on this podcast of Live Life with Sean, grief would have probably been way down at the bottom. It wouldn't have been a subject that I wanted to talk to people about. It wouldn't have been something that I wanted to open up and really talk about. But as I felt into this grief message, it just meant that I just needed to talk about it. I've written a fair bit about it, but this is just something that I needed to add a voice to. So when this happens for you, be with the emotion. Just sit with it. It'll pass. I mean, this grief, this sadness that I've had with my mother over the past week has just kind of flowed in and out. I was drawn to watch a movie called Clouds on Disney Plus this past weekend. And, No, it was about a high school student who had terminal cancer. And I cried through that movie many times, many different situations. But it's just allowing those feelings to flow when they need to flow. Don't just bottle them up. And I am thankful that I have people around me that I can go talk to, pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm just feeling this. And they'll poke at me and say, that's that, and get me to find out that, oh, it's probably grief, or it's something else, or it's related to this or that. And just be with the feelings, be with them. It's okay. There's probably a message in there for you. There's probably something that you need to do. There's probably somebody out there who can help you. And look, if you need somebody to talk to, look me up. I'll listen. I can't say that I've been through the same experiences that you're going through, but I'll listen. And I hope this has been helpful for you. It's been helpful for me. I do have to say, as with every passing, every special moment, I do have to do a toast. So I've got my little scotch here in my special scotch glass. And I just want to say, cheers, Mom. I miss you. I love you. Thinking about you today. Thank you for sharing tonight with me. Thank you for joining me for Live Life with Sean. If you'd like somebody to talk to, just go to my website, SeanCHiggins.com. Go to the Connect with Sean link and say you want a coaching session with me. It's free. Let's talk. Let me see if I can help you through whatever you're going through. We can share, connect. If you enjoyed this show, please share it, subscribe it, like it, and or leave a comment, as this will help others find this podcast. And until next week, have a wonderful week. Feel what you're feeling. And I'll see you next week. Thank you.